of foods, and we rank the food by its percentage of calories, by how many calories it has, and then how much of those calories is in the form of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. So, when you eat broccoli, basically 3.5 ounces of broccoli, just call it a half a cup, okay? So a half a cup of broccoli is 32 calories. Very few calories. Right. Of those 32 calories, 45% of them, almost half of them, is protein. Now, let's be fair. How much broccoli would you have to eat to get your daily protein allowance? Well, after you finish your second bushel, you may get tired of it. You see my point? So it's an extremely bulky food. But watch what God does. The bulkier the food, the higher the protein. Look with me, okay? See, God is the best food scientist possible. And if you will just study the way God makes food, you're going to learn an incredible lot, and you're going to dispel a whole lot of myths. When we get to the soybean, we'll get rid of some more myths, okay? So broccoli, 32 calories, 45% of them are protein. Now you know why the cow does all right. 8% fat. Even broccoli has some fat. There's no such thing as a fat-free food in God's kingdom. Not one single food, can I name for you, has no fat. Even oranges have fat. But think of it this way. What if broccoli didn't have fat? You'd plant your broccoli plant, and after a hard rainstorm, you go out there and you have a bunch of pile of green mush on the ground. No. You go out there and what do you see? You look on the leaves and you see water all bubbled up like that just washed and waxed your car. Well, what's the wax in the leaf of the broccoli? It's called fat. So, God makes things, learn a lesson. Okay, cabbage. It has less calories. By the way, cabbage has probably got the most amount of nutrients per calorie. Nutrition per calorie. That's what you're looking for. See, your goal is not to get calories. Your goal is to get nutrients. Right. And if you can get nutrients with less fuel, then you're ahead. Most of the time it's the other way around. When you eat a pure fat, you've got no nutrients, you have solid calories. That's on one end. The cabbage and broccoli are kind of like on the other end of this spectrum. Okay, so 22% protein, 7% fat, big carbohydrate. Cauliflower, 40% protein. Celery, 21% protein. And celery is one of those foods that by the time you chew it, swallow it, digest, eliminate it, you've used more calories than what's in it. It's the perfect weight loss food. The more you eat, the faster you lose. It almost sounds like Dr. Atkins' diet. The more protein you eat, the faster you lose. Anyway, I'm not putting down celery. I'm just saying that for 17 calories for a whole half a cup, it's going to cost you more than that to chew it.
That's right.
Yes, ma'am.
I got a question. On the cabbage, you get thyme. So that's just the plain old cabbage you get in the store. Now, if you go with a darker cabbage or a different type of cabbage, is there more benefits from...
You won't get probably a different display in the protein, fat, carbohydrate, but what you will get is a difference in the actual vitamin or mineral content. As a general rule, the darker cabbage, the reddish cabbage, is probably going to have a little more iron than the green cabbage.
Oh, okay.
But have either one or get some of both and make your plate look good.
Okay, I was just wondering.
I don't want to step on this, Chuck. Okay, collard greens, 45 calories in a half a cup, 43% protein.
Wow.
I tell you, cows know what they're doing. Yes, ma'am.
What if you juice the celery?
If you juice it, what you do, look at what happens when you juice it. Your protein content will be roughly the same. Your fat content will probably be about the same, and you'll lose your carbohydrate. What do you throw away when you juice something? Mostly carbohydrate, the pulp, the bulk, the fiber, and all that. Now, why do you juice? And who should be juicing? The person should be juicing who needs high nutrients and they can't digest well. So I'm talking about my cancer patient. They need high nutrients without a lot of work. It's not really pre-digested, but it's easy for them. Most of us don't need to juice. You need whole food. Most of you need to use your teeth. You need to use your digestion. You need to have good stools. You need to get the work for your intestinal tract. Most of you don't need to juice. In fact, it actually works against you. And for diabetics, we give them no juices because they can't handle it. Because what do you give a diabetic when they take too much insulin? Orange juice. And why do you do that? So you can get a burst of sugar in there a whole lot quicker than about any other way. Okay. Cucumbers, 15 calories, 24% protein. Kale, 45. Potato, as in white potato, 11. Summer squash. Sweet potatoes is the first food that I can feed my kidney patients because I want them below 10. For my people that are in kidney failure, renal failure. And you come on down here to watercress at 46, turnips, and tomato. The reason I like this slide is because it should totally impress on you that no matter what vegetable you eat, you're really in good shape.
Right.
Have your choice. It's fine. It's good. I'm ready to flip it, sir. You got what you need? That's okay. Don't want to mess up your program. So, legumes. Okay, let's take a look at beans. We've got chickpeas, or garbanzos, or pinto beans, lentils, peanuts, and yes, I put peanuts in there because technically they are a legume. They grow underground, and they are Goober's peas if you're from Alabama or wherever. So, look at the fat content of the pinto bean. 6% fat, 46% protein, 71 carbohydrate. Beans are a low-fat, highly concentrated food until we get to soybeans, and we'll talk about that. Garbanzos, 23, 12, 65. Lentils, 29, 3% fat. 68. Now you know if you go to Dr. Ornish, Dean Ornish, we'll get the words together here. If you go to Dr. Ornish's site, you'll see that he gives his people, his heart patients, and probably his prostate group, they probably ate a fair amount of lentils. Good food, but what I want to show you is lentils are 3% fat. Now, Dean Ornish is trying to keep his people below 10% fat, so he's automatically going to pick the foods that even within the good range are low in fat because it's easy to get one that's got 12 that's still a good food, like chickpeas. And he wants to keep them to 10 or less, so you can work your menu. Peanuts, they're a fat, they're not a protein. 18% protein, 76% fat. Now look at the soybean. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 33, 34, 33. Now why did God make that one? Because he wanted to tell me that a lot of the books on the market aren't worth reading. The books that tell you, do not mix your carbs and your protein. Do not mix your protein and your starches. Well, will you kind of explain that to me? What God says is I mix them perfectly. Here's my carbs, here's my protein, and I throw the same amount of fat in there. Utterly amazing food. And so what I did, because I didn't want to get my carbs and my protein together, I took my soybean, cut it in 3 pieces, and only ate 2 of them. That's how ridiculous those books are. And a lot of the books are not written for vegetarians. You'll find that to be true because they don't know what they're talking about. They don't eat like a vegetarian. They don't understand vegetarian. And they don't understand that I probably eat 80% carbohydrate. And they look at me and goes, how can you eat 80% carbohydrate and not be as big as the door? I go, because that's the way it is. Grains, you can see protein content. Rice would be the lowest. Rice is 5% fat, 8% protein. I think Dr. Campbell on his chart this morning recommending that people eat 10% of their diet as protein is actually liberal. That's not conservative. That's not the lowest. That is healthy level. Here we have rice at 8. We've got some populations that rice is their only source of protein, and they're doing well. Hopefully it's brown, not white rice. And then here's your spring wheat and your rye, etc. This is the way God makes food, and that's why we can get a lesson from it. Nuts tend to be higher in calories, obviously, lower in protein, high fat, and low carbs. That's why God put nuts in shells. Now we go to the store and we buy a pound of this or a pound of that. We're spoiled. See, I was a kid on a small farm, and we used to have hickory nuts. Now, you really work a lot to get something out of a hickory nut. And black walnuts weren't too far behind that. And when Mom would say, I need you to pick some black walnuts because I want to make some cookies, I mean, they were almost like gold. You pick out a quart of black walnut hulls, and you've got about 6 hours into it. Am I not right? Some of you have done that? Oh, man.
My mom used to say God put shells on the nuts for a reason.
That's right.
You're not supposed to eat so much.
That's right. I mean, think of it this way. If you had to crack every nut you're eating now to be able to get you'd eat a lot less. It's just the way it's made. Okay, seeds.
Eat too much.
Seeds are a little bit higher in protein, a little lower in fat. There's some better. Have any of you tried the sun butter, sunflower seed butter? Pretty good stuff. You may want to try it. And a whole lot healthier for you than peanut butter, by the way. Okay, look at fruits. Fruits are the first food that are actually low protein. So if you came to me and said, I'm a fruitarian, I'm going to go, you might want to put a little bit of beans in. That's the only group that I even get close to being concerned about. And very few people eat only fruit. And in the fruit category, I put avocados. I want to show you that avocados are high fat and low protein and low carb. A banana is low protein and low fat and high carb. Can you imagine a fruit with 93% carbohydrates? But, everybody will tell you that's good for you, but they want to be on a low-carb diet. So you just ate a banana. How about olives? Olives high fat, low carb, that type of thing. Anyway, this gives you an overview. And best, you've noticed that I haven't put any meat up there. This is all protein from just eating a vegetable-based diet. Whole food, plant-based diet. Well, I wanted to show you these 3 slides because this morning I was talking quickly about you can get protein out of asking you what food has the most amount of protein and the least amount of fat and the protein concentration. Obviously broccoli. Well, any of these would almost be the right answer. Broccoli, cauliflower, collards, kale. Do I have a Swiss chart on here? I don't. But your greens would be good. Okay. Also wanted to clear up another point on this nutrition and epigenetics, and that is some of you want to know exactly what am I talking about. Of course, I told you exercise, told you eat your good food. Here's the what, okay? There are specific things that they've already found out about that what increases the gene to respond with those methyl groups. One type of food is called betaine. Now, betaine is from beets, okay? Betaine is also what you give a person who has a digestive problem because they're not making enough hydrochloric acid. So if you go to the store and buy a bottle of betaine HCl, hydrochloric acid, we use that to improve because anyone over 60 probably isn't making enough acid in their stomach. And a lot of times they'll come to me and say, oh, I've got heartburn, and I've got this, and I've got that. I go, well, this is going to sound funny to you, but I'm going to give you some acid. They go, Doc, my acid's already too bad. I go, I'm not crazy. I go, I'm going to give you some acid. I want you to try it at least once and prove me right or wrong. Because 99% of the time I'm right on this particular score anyway. And so they'll go home, I said, now buy a small bottle, we don't want to mess up here. So they'll go home, they'll take 500 milligrams of betaine HCl, and they'll call me and go, that's amazing stuff. I go, well, did it burn you? No, it didn't burn me at all. I go, well, good, okay, how'd you do? Well, I think my food didn't lay there for 5 hours and cause all kinds of reflux and acid coming up. See, acid reflux has more to do with food fermenting in the stomach because it can't get digested quick enough, or you're eating too much fats and it's not being able to pass on through. When you give the stomach a chance to do the job, see, stomach acid's about pH of 3. I mean, that is powerful. Stomach acid will eat nails. Okay? That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to break down iron. That's normal. The problem is it's not supposed to break down the wall of the stomach. So a person under stress is not producing enough mucus to protect the wall, and the hydrochloric acid they think is bad, and it lays there longer, so they wind up in the long run taking Nexium. And after they pay $150 for Nexium, they come and see me. I'm more reasonable. But it's just ridiculous how we think. So 99 out of 100 people that you're going to see that claim to have acid in digestion probably aren't making enough acid. So see, I have some naturopathic friends who think differently than I do, and it's good to rub shoulders. Okay. Betaine from beets is one of your methyl-donating groups that can change how your epigenetics work in your body. So, what's the deal? Get your beets. Next thing is any B vitamin. The whole B complex is critical for a proper genetic expression. And that includes everything from thiamine to riboflavin to niacin to pyridoxine to B12 to biotin. The whole B family, the whole B complex improves your methylation of your genes. Phosphatidylserine and phosphatidylcholine, fancy words for lecithin, okay? Lecithin is one of your products that donates to proper genetic manifestation. And soy happens to have both of those in. Soy is not bad. Isolated soy protein you leave in the store. An isolated soy or soy concentrate, you leave that in the store. That's what man messed up. Soybeans are okay. Soy milk is okay. Tofu is okay, even though man messed that up a little bit, okay? And folic acid. Now you're hearing a lot about folic acid because they want the young mother who's pregnant to take folic acid because of what? Because we don't want to mess up the child's genes and mess up their nervous system. So it all fits. Now, that's a brief what we know. It doesn't mean that your soybean or your broccoli doesn't have something in this necessary. This is just the ones they have tested. And I'm looking for one. Here's what I wanted. Don't count dad out. So if a pregnant mother's diet can affect the child's epigenetic outcome, can dad's diet do the same? Well, dad definitely isn't pregnant, okay, so we know that one. But can it do the same? Quite possibly. According to science, who devolved a well-kept historical records of annual harvest from a small Swedish community. Annual records of the smallest of their harvest. Now, why did they keep records of the harvest? Because some were good harvest and some were starving harvest. People died from starvation. So let's go on. These records showed that food availability between the ages of 9 to 12 for the parental grandfather. Now let's do the generations here, okay? We're talking grandfather, not son, and grandson. We're back here at grandfather. Records showed food availability between the ages of 9 to 12, those 3 years, for the parental grandfather affected the lifespan of his grandchildren, but not in the way you might think. Here's their conclusion. Shortage of food for grandfather was associated with an extended lifespan of his grandchildren. So grandfather, who was lean and almost starved between 9 to 12, his offspring 2 generations away have a longer lifespan. This epigenetic stuff is pretty neat. Food abundance, on the other hand, was associated with a great shortened lifespan of the grandchildren. So, talk to Grandpa. How was your grandpa? How was it between ages 9 to 12? Well, most of us probably don't have that information. But I will tell you this. Food availability in our country was always a lot less than what we have now. In fact, we lost a lot of people on the Mayflower because not only were they sick, they were starving when they came. So we have a lot of ancestry of very meager times. I mean, the concept of going to a grocery store for your great-grandpa, he wouldn't, what am I going to do here? I mean, these people, who's going to eat all this stuff, you know? Okay, where are we at? Early death was a result of either diabetes or heart disease. Could it be that during this critical period of development of the grandfather, age 9 to 12, epigenetic mechanisms were capturing nutritional information about the environment to pass on to the next generation? That's how neat this stuff is. And of course it goes on, we won't take time, but some of you are beekeepers, or maybe you're a beekeeper that knows enough about keeping bees. What's the difference between a queen bee and a worker bee? Genetically. Nothing. They're exactly the same genetically. So how do I get a queen? Royal jelly. No, really, that's the name for it. Seriously. It's called royal jelly. And that royal jelly turns genes on and turns certain ones off, and you will wind up with a queen. And the worker lifespan is about 6 weeks during the working phase, like in the summer when they're out there gathering nectar. And the queen hopefully will live long enough for at least that generation to winter over. And then they'll make another new queen in the spring, and the old queen, if she's peppy enough, she'll take care of the new queen. If she's not, then that's how they keep genetics alive. Anyway, that's a short version of that. I got to catch up on everything I said this morning. Sugar, artificial sweeteners induce glucose intolerance by altering gut microbes in the intestinal tract, your bacteria. Real quick statement. Non-caloric artificial sweeteners, Splenda, NutraSweet, saccharin, etc., are among the most widely used food additives worldwide, regularly consumed by lean and obese individuals alike. These non-caloric artificial sweetener consumption is considered safe and beneficial owing to their low-calorie content, yet supporting scientific data remains sparse and controversial. Here we demonstrate, we're talking about their study here, here we demonstrate that consumption of the commonly used artificial sweeteners drives the development of glucose intolerance through induction of compositional and fractional, we're getting pretty heavy here, alterations in the microbial in the gut. What they're saying, if you didn't get that, what they're saying is that if you get artificial sweeteners, it actually changes the bacteria in your intestinal tract, and the bacterial intestinal tract have a direct effect on your glucose tolerance or intolerance in your bloodstream. So why do I want diabetics to eat a plant-based diet? Because a plant-based diet changes your gut microbes to a healthy type of a state, not like the ones do on meat. And when I have a healthy intestinal tract, I actually do better and am less likely to be a diabetic. So look at the devil's trick on us. What if we feed a whole population antibiotics whenever they have a sniffle, a runny nose, a sore, or this or that? What if I feed a whole population antibiotics for 50 years? What's going to happen to them?
Destroys their intestines.
We're making diabetics, folks. This diabetic epidemic is man-made.
Amen.
It's also doctor-made. Isn't that incredible? But when you have a loved one who survived a major catastrophe, because an antibiotic, I believe, has actually saved some people's lives. Now, putting it back in God's hands, sometimes I wonder whether medicine is doing God's will, or are we working against God too? So you have that debate. When you work at a hospital and you hear a siren, are you happy or are you sad? That's a real question, isn't it? Because if you never hear a siren, what's that mean? You're out of a job. So it's really kind of an interesting scenario we put ourselves in. Okay. I can't say more because I have enough here to be here for a while. Different types of fat actually change what happens to the coronary arteries. Obviously, this is human. This is not a rat study. It says the influence of diet on the appearance of lesions, medical term for increase in your plaque, obviously, in human coronary arteries. Now, you want to know what dietary influences are talking about? Lauric acid. That's a fatty acid with a 12-carbon fatty acid commonly known as coconut oil. Coconut oil increases lesions in human coronary arteries. You see, I'm getting too old, I guess. I've been around the block at least twice, and I saw this whole coconut craze coming in, and I just have to wait it out. Because there's books out there, there's people that put it on the outside, they put it on the inside, and they do all kinds with coconut. I'm talking about coconut oil here. If you use shredded coconut in your granola, I'm not worried about using the whole nut. Now let's go on. The other two that were implicated, let me just read it. Increased intake of lauric, oleic, and linoleic acid significantly risk increases. Subjects in the cholesterol-lowering acid associated in whom the new lesions did not develop increased dietary protein to compensate for reduced fat intake. They're saying they kept things the same. This wasn't due to a high or low protein. But lauric acid, we said, is coconut. Where do you think oleic acid is from? Olive. Oleic. Olive. Okay, that's easy. Their particular sources were not the olive. Their particular sources were from chicken and baked goods. So that's not really a fair one. And then the linolenic would also be from olive. That's what we call our essential fatty acids, but they can still be from chicken or cake or other things. So first of all, when you read a research like this, ask them what the source is. Secondarily, ask them what the fat is. The reason I wanted this piece of data is because everybody's telling me how good olive oil is for them. I'm going, I don't think so. Coconut oil, oh, this is the greatest stuff. I go, I don't think so. Because the evidence doesn't do it. I mean, how many heart attacks do you think that taking extra coconut oil has helped? I don't know. I can't even answer my own question. Okay. Let's back up. Okay, I have no problem in convincing you that sugar is not the best to eat. Or if you do eat sugar, you're going to eat it minimally. But now when it comes to oil, which is a highly refined food, actually as refined or more refined than sugar, everybody goes, oh no. I'm going, wait a minute, this is not logical. Oil is a refined food. Most oils are refined to the point where they are nothing but fat. Vitamin E is gone. Their steroids are gone that are with it, plant steroids. Here I'm not talking about prednisone. Their fiber is definitely gone. It is one of the highest calorie. It is the highest calorie per gram. It's 9 calories per gram of fat. So I've got the highest calorie food. I got the hardest food to digest. I've lost all the nutrients of it. And if you let olive oil sit out, it'll go rancid in a matter of weeks. So now you see why the researchers are going, okay, you all are talking about using all these great vegetable oils. But when I look at the cancer data, guess what I find? It's not working out. When you go to the ravediet.com that I was telling this gentleman about, guess what they have to do to try to reverse disease? R, no refined foods. A, no animal products. That one's easy. V is what? Come on, guess. No vegetable oils. And this isn't me making this up. These are people out there in the field who aren't even vegetarian. I mean, that's, no vegetable oils. I'm sorry, the word is ALL, all vegetable oils, NO. There isn't one. There is no good vegetable oil. It doesn't exist. So what do you do? Dose relationship is always a factor. The more, the worse you're going to get.
I can attest to the fact that you can, if you're going to fry anything, that you can use apple juice.
Now that's interesting. That might even flavor your potatoes pretty good. All the way in the back. We'll finish our oil discussion.
Well,
here.
I mean, you use it for your skin, for the face.
Okay, external,
Yeah.
I'm a whole lot less worried about you. You can even use coconut external, and I know of no problems as far as heart disease from external application. No, I'm serious here. Our skin does absorb things. Yeah. But the question is, why do you need external oils?
No, not for moisturizer, for the face.
No, but why?
Because it's going to get dry.
Okay, and then the next question is, why is your face dry? I'm trying. I'll stop asking questions. Here's my point. If my face is dry, I should look at my diet and find out what I'm doing. Guess what gives your face good lubrication? Stop washing it. You go, oh, you want me dirty? No, I'm saying we are so clean that we actually cause a lot of our dermatological problems.
That's right.
We lose our oils. Okay? Now, if you smell bad, you may lose some friends, but you'll have healthy skin. So, ask the right question. Hopefully we'll get the right answer. So if your skin is dry, it can be a disease condition, it can be a dietary condition, or it can be an excessive hygiene condition.
So how often do you take a bath?
That's up to you. Some people need to wash their face 3 times a day. I mean, when you were a teenager, how greasy was your face?
Yeah.
Okay, now you're 50, how greasy is your face? Well, where'd it go? Well, everything from hormones to growing up to I'm not 15 anymore. I mean, why don't adults have a face full of pimples? Well, very few do.
Which oil you recommend then? Which oils you recommend?
And when you sweat, what happens to the oil glands? Well, that's our big problem, folks. When was the last time you sweat really good? We got a good worker here. Okay. Yeah. When you perspire, ladies glow. I know sweat was not the right word. When ladies glow, it's a whole lot healthier for their skin. They cleanse the skin. They get out impurities. Wash with water, not soap and water. Most of what comes out of your skin is water soluble. I know you're going to leave here and say, Dr. Collins wants me to smell bad and not look good. No, I want you to actually look better, and I want you to keep your natural oils. If you've got to put an oil on the outside, we are actually doing something wrong. That's my point. That's why I was talking with the lady on the back row, because I wanted her to understand that we should have natural oils to take care of our skin correctly. Now, there are some races that have incredibly natural oils and healthy skin. The people that live around the Mediterranean somehow got a gene or doing something right. Some. Maybe they put it on the outside. I don't know. But the point is that they have incredible skin. And they can look many years younger than what they really are. You know?
So, Doc, whatever oil is best oil to use then?
What's that?
Whatever oil is best oil to use.
Oh, let's get back to that. The best of the worst is probably still olive. If you are going to use an oil, probably the best and least harmful out there on the market is still olive. But I want to tell you about it. You can get extra virgin, cold pressed, first pressing, whatever olive oil, and you missed the whole point. They say it's cold pressed. Why don't they also say, is it cold processed? It's not. You don't get that nice golden oil without that kind of processing. And by the way, if you're worried about Bible times, take yourself a gallon of olives, stomp on them for an hour, squeeze out all the particles from that olive, and what will you have?
Dark color oil. It's going to be kind of darkish, kind of greenish color. Like that.
And if you go to the grocery store, the health food store, there's a product called HAUN, H-A-U-N. They make oils. And if you look at their bottle of oil, it'll look like just what this gentleman's talking about. And there'll be about an inch of mud in the bottom of it. It's not mud. It's just particles. That's close to biblical olive oil as I probably can get. Now, Udo's oils, you may have heard that name if you study oils a lot. Dr. Udo will guarantee you that his olive oil is cold pressed and cold processed, and it's extra virgin, etc., etc. But when you pay the price tag, you will use it for perfume, not for frying. You see my point?
Yeah.
So therefore, get your fats from an avocado. Get your fats from olives. If you don't need to lose something around the middle, get your fats from nuts and from seeds and from everything that's got good fats in. God knows what He was doing.
What kind of oil would you advise then, other than the coconut and the olive oil? That's what I do.
The olive oil, like I said, is the best of the worst. No, ma'am. There is no such thing as a good oil. Period. So what you do is, if you want to use oil, you go work your way back and say, what is the least harmful? So when I say the best of the worst, I mean the least harmful. And the cruder the application, or the cruder the olive oil, the better it is for you. It's like flax oil. A lot of people grind their own flaxseed. They get the fiber, they get the lignans, they get the antioxidant, and they get the omega-3 fats. Some people want to go to the store and buy the flaxseed oil already pressed out. Well, they've missed their lignin, their anti-cancer fighters, they've missed their fiber, they've missed their nutrients, and they have to actually add some kind of antioxidant, because your flaxseed oil will go rancid on you quite quickly.
That's true.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have to eat that raw, or can you be cooked?
This is irrelevant to cooked, steamed, or raw as far as the protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Now, if you steam something, you actually do two things. You lose some of your vitamins, but you got another advantage. When you break down the cellulose structure in those fibers, you probably get a little more minerals. So all the advantages are not on the raw side, and all the advantages are not on the cooked side. And I always like the Bible text, seethe what you're going to seethe. Talking about preparation for Sabbath. Well, seethe doesn't mean raw. Seethe means cooking. So I'm not against cooked food at all. The only people I put on raw food is people that need to detox, and most time they're unfortunately stage 3 and stage 4 cancer. And I want to give everything I can. But I also consider carrot juice raw food. So I can concentrate their calories and their nutrients in a raw state. Okay, let me get on to another. So, before I go on, any questions that you thought of or would like to have covered? Well, good. Maybe I'm doing a real good job, or you had too much for lunch. Okay. I always like to put this up because it's interesting. Hippocrates, about 400 years before Jesus, the father of medicine stated, "Let food be your medicine and let medicine be your food," which I believe is correct. The next part, he also stated, "Medicine should do no harm." See, when a medical doctor takes the hypocritical oath,
Yes, you're right.
did I say that right? The
You said it right.
hypocritical.
That's right.
See, you can't practice medicine with the last statement.
No, you can't. Not today.
If you recommend to even take your aspirin your patient take an 81 milligram aspirin, you have messed up your oath.
That's true. I'm gonna kill him.
It's a poison.
Yes, bleed inside.
Okay. I thought we'd continue on since we're on the theme of, well, I thought I could get it to work. No, it worked. Thank you. We're going to continue on but feel free to stop with any question. We're going to look a little more at diabetes since that's kind of our theme today. Once again, why is it a problem? First of all, we're saying about 25.8 million Americans are diabetic, known diabetic. 8.3% of our population diagnosed and undiagnosed. Now, how do we know about the undiagnosed ones if we haven't diagnosed them yet? Okay. Well, what it means is that a lot of people are out there that are truly diabetic and they don't know it. And when we find out, we go, well, we're missing about so much percent of the population. Here's the group that I'm really worried about. And this is a misconcept in medicine. A lot of doctors used to use the terminology, and maybe hopefully it wasn't used on you. They call you borderline diabetic. There's no such thing as borderline diabetic. You either are or you're not. Either you're walking down the wrong road or you're on the right road. But the doctors use that term because of why? Because they're not treating you. Because you're not ready for a medication. And if you're not ready for a medication, then you must be healthy. Well, that's the poorest level of health you can possibly get. It's like saying, I'm not dead, therefore I'm alive. Well, that's kind of like the lowest criteria. This is the group that I would like to reach. 79 million Americans plus 25 puts me over 100 million Americans. And if you put those two numbers together, that's 1 out of 3 in our population. We have about 330 million in America. And we got 1.9, basically 2 million new cases in 2010, and it continues to go up at that rate. Age distribution, less than 20 age group, we have 1/4 of 1% of our population. It should be 0. These are mostly the type 1 diabetic here. 20 plus, we've got 25 million, which means 20 plus, which goes all the way up to 100. And 65 plus, like I was telling you this morning, is 26.9% of the group. Every 4th person you meet walking down that street of 65-year-olds is diabetic. 1 out of 4. So when I go to Florida and I walk through a retirement community to see my wife's parents, 1 out of 4 people I meet, So if I lecture on diabetes, I've got a good audience. This doesn't apply to you, but I live in Madison County. I lecture in Yancey County and Buncombe County. This is where Asheville, North Carolina is. And it's probably normal for here. Percent diabetics and percent number and that type of thing, but that's irrelevant to us. This is relevant. Diagnosed and undiagnosed. 20 to 40 age group, about 3.7%, 13.7% in the 45 to 64, and once again our 26.9 in our greater. Direct cost, about 174, that is billion. Direct medical cost, about 116, and indirect cost, about 58 billion. Loss of work, premature mortality, disability, etc., etc. It is a major problem. Type 1 and Type 2, we've already talked about this. Type 1 is juvenile, used to be called juvenile. Most time it happens in people between age 6 to 20. Minimal to no insulin production. They are insulin dependent. They have to have it, otherwise they would die. Normal to thin weight, and most begin less than 20 years of age. The type 2 used to be called adult diabetes. They are usually adults. They do produce insulin. Not enough to take care of their sugar craving, but they do produce insulin. They're not insulin dependent. They don't have to have insulin. They're overweight, and they're mostly adult onset. My wife enjoyed the side effects, okay? Type 1, lack of insulin, no family history. Let me read that again. No family history. This is not a genetic problem. These are epigenetic changes at a very young age. Cause these islets of Langerhans, that's the type of cells in the pancreas that are destroyed. Usually destroyed by an antibody or by a virus. Antibodies to milk albumin are so close to this type of tissue in the pancreas that when you make antibodies to cow's milk, you can wipe out your pancreas. The increase of autoimmune diseases is just so incredible that it makes me feel like I'm an old doctor, because when I went through school, what did we have for autoimmune disease? We had rheumatoid arthritis, we had lupus. You could put cancer in that category as affecting the immune system, which it does. That was our biggies. Now we have a whole host, and now we don't even keep up with tests. I have patients come in the office, they have all the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, they've got the joints, they've got this, they got multiple joints involved. They say, but my ANA, that's for lupus diagnosis, my test came out. I say, how about your rheumatoid factor? That came out fine. And so what does it tell them? You're not sick. I'm going, no. See the swollen joints, see what they're going through. I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a test yet that tells you what's wrong, but we know you have an immune system and autoimmune disease that we're dealing with here, so we're going to treat you. Type 2, insulin resistant. They make insulin, but when we say resistant, we mean that the cell doesn't work properly with the correct amount of insulin. It takes more and more insulin to try to get the fat cell to absorb the glucose and store it. It is genetic. It is a family trend, a family history. Cause is diet and obesity. See, here's the problem. We pick on people in this area, I realize. But you don't realize that the adipose cell, the fat cell itself, puts out a variety of hormones. They call them adipokines, hormones from fat cells. And these adipokines actually can affect your genetic outtake. So I realize it's all back to genetics. 85 to 90% of diabetics are in this category, obviously 10 to 15% in that. These are associated with a low-fiber diet. I bring it out because I want to point out that diabetes mellitus, strokes, heart disease, colon polyps. How many of your friends go and get a colonoscopy and say, I had a polyp? Are polyps abnormal? Everybody will tell you. And then to make you feel good, what does the doctor tell you? It was precancerous. I go, well, so is my nose. No, I'm serious. Everything is precancerous by that definition. If it's not cancer, then it's precancerous, right? I mean, it either is cancer or it's not. When you look at the cells under the microscope, that is either an abnormal cell or it's not. So I think they do a lot of things to make you feel better about getting such a barbaric treatment. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to love to hear the stories of witch doctors. They were incredible. They'd get a dried tail of a goose and a dried tail of a rat, and they'd mix up a little potion and go give it to one of the natives and go, well, these guys are incredible. They actually believe it would work. Well, now I'm starting to see that in American medicine. I'm going, those witch doctor stories I used to listen to as a kid? What witch doctor ever took a hose and did that to somebody with it? And so I'm not sure we're any better than the old witch doctor tales that I used to hear about when I was a kid. Anyway, constipation, appendicitis, diverticular, hiatus hernia, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, bowel cancer. Fiber is what? What we thought we could throw away and get away with it. We refine our food and throw away the good part. It's like the stories you heard about the poor boy and his mother, and he were almost starving to death. And what would the neighbor do? The neighbor would give them the potato peelings, and the boy would get the neighbor's potato peelings and take them home to his mom, and she'd cook it and make some kind of broth or soup for them so they could survive. Well, what the neighbor didn't realize is they got the white potato and they gave all the nutrition to the poor people, and that's how they survived. Because where's the nutrition on a potato? It's about an eighth of an inch thick around the potato. The rest of it is just the white and the starch. It's actually minor nutrients. So next time you eat your baked potato and throw the skin away, you got my point. Dietary trends. Follow any country that does this and will have this problem. Look at this. Starch, which would be the fiber component, went from 53% in 1860 down to 11% in 2007. Now you know why we have so many laxative businesses. Let's take another look. What happened to fat? Grandpa, even though he may have eaten fat back and chased his hog around, 25% fat. Now his grandkids that thought Grandpa ate a lot of fat, with their Doritos, they didn't go the right direction. We've got a lot more hidden fats now. Look what happened to sugar. Blue. Sugar's gone up. And what's happened to protein? Pretty stable, going up a little bit. This profile is indicative of heart disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity. It's the whole story over and over again. This is blood sugar levels of diabetics on a low and a high fiber diet. If you want to slow down and normalize and get rid of these sugar spikes, you go on a high fiber diet. Yes, the sugar goes up and undulates like that throughout the day, but if you eat a diet, same amount of calories, just lower fiber, sugars are much higher and they vacillate a lot more. So the high fiber diet is critical. So James Anderson over there in Louisville, Kentucky, has a high fiber, high carb diet for his diabetics. Apples, whether you eat a whole apple, whether you eat applesauce or apple juice, here's what happens at the bloodstream. And once again, this is a scientific project, which means, guess what we did? We fed you either one apple, skin included, or we fed you what applesauce one apple would make, or we had you drink one juice of one apple. And that's all, and then followed you. Well, how many of you only eat one thing at one time? So it's kind of an artificial study, but let's look what it did to the blood sugar. First of all, every single food within 30 minutes made the blood sugar go almost the same level. These are normal people, not diabetic. Now, after that, it all changed. So I'm worried about the change because the apple juice group, the red line here, dropped back to where they were started from, lower, and by 1 hour, the blood sugar was almost around the 50 level. You know what you feel like with a blood sugar of 50? You're looking for food. You're wondering what's going on. I can't think straight. I can't concentrate. I'm not getting anything done. What's wrong here? So that group didn't pull out. Here's an hour and a half, 2 hours. At the end of the experiment, 3 hours, they still hadn't pulled out yet. So what's the moral of the story? If you're going to drink juices, it needs to be with some other food that can handle that.
Eat the apple.
What's that?
Eat the apple.
Eat the apple.
Get the juice.
Even though their levels went down, came back up and stabilized here, even applesauce. And by the way, I like all of them and make them all. I just don't do them individually. See, this time of the year, my family usually goes and gets a lug of apples. Now, Hendersonville, one of the apple capitals there in North Carolina, isn't that far away. So we can get a lug of apples between 22 to 27 bushels. And you're going to smile at this one for about $50, okay?
Yeah.
Can you believe that? And so we juice them, we applesauce them, and sometimes the ladies even make some apple butter, I guess. But the reason I'm telling you this is because when we juice, guess where the pulp goes? In the front bucket of the tractor, and we take it and dump it. But we know how much we're throwing away. So if we get a yield of product, we call it product yield, whether it be applesauce, whether it be apple juice or whatever, and sometimes we get a really good yield. The last year when we did apples, we probably had about 25 bushel, and we got over a 60-gallon yield from that, which means if you start doing the average, and you'll see that we got over, well, a little bit over, no, I'm wrong. No. Per bushel, for 50 bushels, we got 60 gallons of product. That's what we got out of that. So anyway, by the way, that's a phenomenal yield when it comes to juice or whatever. Okay, where are we at? Sources of fiber. Once again, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber is like your oatmeal. And if you overcook your oatmeal, it turns into Elmer's glue. That's the water-soluble, starchy component. And actually, that's a healthy component. The water insoluble is like wheat. Excellent broom, takes care of the bowels, but it is not as healing for the bowel wall. So we use the soluble fibers for people with gastritis, for colitis, for Crohn's disease, for regional enteritis, for ulcerative colitis, etc. Dried figs, and very few people are going to eat 10, is 7.5. And by the way, your goal of fiber for a day is somewhere between 40 to 50 grams of fiber a day. So, dried figs, 7. A couple of garbanzo beans, 8. Lima beans, 8.9. Soy dried. Now, see, soybeans dry, okay? Ladies, when you cook your soybeans, what we're going to get? At least 3? Maybe 4 to 1? Okay. So you can see that this is not the way you're going to eat them. Red kidney beans, 12. Corn grits. Any of you from the South here? You can actually get good grits, but you have to take good whole corn and grind it, and all you do is you have a coarse grind of corn. There's nothing wrong with grits. Most of the time, though, grits are equivalent to basically white bread, because they denature them and they take all the fiber out and they make it almost worthless. And then, of course, they put their slab of butter in that and they make it totally worthless. And carob flour. Well, very few of us eat 1 cup of carob flour. Now, carob flour is actually not from the bean. It's from the pod. Have you ever seen carob pods? They are in the locust family, which makes them a legume. When John the Baptist ate locusts and honey, what do you think he was eating?
Carob.
The insects that flew around? No, you may imagine that. No, he was eating locusts, pods, commonly known as carob. They're about 6 to 8 inches long, slightly curved, crescent shape, and you let them dry, and they turn a dark brown. The seeds are more brown than that. And you grind up the pod once it dries, and that becomes your carob flour, your carob powder, whatever you want to. And then you can get some that's roasted and some that's unroasted, etc., etc. Okay. Insoluble fiber, oat bran, dried coconut, pistachios, black-eyed peas, almonds, lentils, and corn bran. Well, this is a wheat bran and corn bran are obviously bran. I mean, that's not a whole food, so you can see why they're so much higher. Artificial sweeteners. Studies were done on rats, and what they did is they put water into their cage, and in the water they put 2 solutions. They put natural sweeteners, and they put artificial sweeteners. Now, that's not the water consumption that the rats drank. That's food consumption that they ate. So the blue rats use natural sweeteners. It's natural, but it's still white sucrose, which is vegan, by the way. White sugar is vegan. See, vegan, you can be unhealthy. You can be a totally unhealthy vegan too. You know that, okay? I just want to, like a vegetarian. There's ways to cheat on every good thing, okay? So these are vegan. No, these rats were drinking sugar water, as in white sugar water, and these rats were drinking artificial sweetened, whether it be Splenda or NutraSweet. They set the quantity of rat chow that the sugar group ate, and the artificial group actually ate 3 times the amount of food in the same cage, well, not in the same cage next door, with food supplied 24 hours a day. They weren't limited on their food intake. They could eat as much as they want, whenever they wanted. So what do we got here? Rats on artificial sweeteners tended to overeat 3 times as much. Now you're starting to see why we believe that artificial sweeteners are one of the causes of obesity right now in our country. Number of Americans consuming sugar-free products, 70 million in 1987, 160 million, which means that's 1 out of 2 Americans use these. And it hasn't gone down. Aspartame, also known as NutraSweet, have experienced fibromyalgia symptoms, spasms, shooting pains, numbness, cramps, vertigo, dizziness here, headaches, tinnitus, ringing in the ears, joint pain, anxiety attacks, slurred speech, I didn't eat any of this, blurred vision, and memory loss, as if weight gain weren't enough. And the FDA passed this. I don't see how they could pass it. The studies that I'm sharing from you, the FDA has access to them. This is not a healthy food. And we got worse. Money. We went from aspartame, which was terrible, to another neurotoxin, which is called Splenda. They have the nerve to call this sucralose, not sucrose. Before I could tell you that anything ended in OSE was a sugar, they call this sucralose. I mean, they're really pushing it. Research reveals numbness in the legs of rats, enlarged livers, spleens, kidneys, male infertility, and gastrointestinal problems during pregnancy, and greater caloric intake. In other words, if fat weren't enough. 2 patterns, 2 different groups of rats, fed at different times. This is a ad lib. They could eat whenever they wanted, day or night, and as much as they wanted. This group of rats, their time restricted. They were held to 8 hours of eating a day, and that's it. So 16 hours off, 8 hours of eating. The next 16 hours they were off. I want to show you a few things. Low amplitude, high amplitude. Their metabolic rate. The low amplitude meant that they didn't get suppressed very much, nor was their metabolism very high. The rat in this group had a very low, but also a very high metabolic rate. This is really what you want. When you go to sleep, you want to be able to relax and calm down and chill out. When you put fuel in, you want to burn your calories quite rapidly. So we call this a high metabolism, and we call this a suppressed metabolic rate. When you eat has got more to do with this scenario than even what you eat. So what do we find out? Well, adiposity. Are they overweight? Yes, this one's overweight. This one's not. Glucose intolerance. This one's not diabetic. This one is. Leptin resistance. Leptin is a chemical that your fat cell makes. It makes it by how much fat it is storing. So if you're leptin resistant, what that means is the fat cells keep putting out so much leptin, your body starts to ignore it. After a while, you don't get the signal. It's called overfeeding. And so when you're leptin resistant, it can put out leptin, which tells your body to stop, slow down, or it also tells the body to burn more fuel. It doesn't work anymore. So obviously that's up. Liver pathology. Fatty liver is not due to alcohol anymore as much as overweight and diabetes. Before, when a person came with a liver problem, we always said, well, how much are you drinking? And now people can honestly say, I don't drink a drop, never have. I'm going, and your liver's like this, fatty liver. Inflammation in general. This is from joints to blood vessels. And motor coordination. Once again, well coordinated. Once again, these rats are not too well coordinated. Dr. Don Capps, did some interesting research. And he basically proved the rat study. Eat 8 hours a day, take the other 16 off. Here's what he did. He had a few rules for his patients. The first rule is you have to eat breakfast. The second rule is recommend, but you don't have to eat lunch. Third rule is no snacks. Another rule, guess what? No eating 8.5 hours before you go to bed. It sounds pretty anti-American, I know. But look at his logic. Eat a big breakfast, 6 o'clock in the morning. Eat a good-sized meal at 12:30 or 1:30. Be in bed by 9 or 10, depending on how you work it. Sounds like a good schedule to me. So, those who ate breakfast, only breakfast, average a 10-pound weight loss per month. Obviously, these are the ones that need to lose some weight. Those who ate breakfast, lunch, okay, these ate even eggs and snacks, I guess they were okay, 5 to 6 pounds a month. But they all follow the rule of no eating 8.5 hours before you go to bed. Do you realize what we're doing here? They should call this the metabolic diet. We're actually matching your body's metabolism. We go, okay, how does the body work? And I'm going to put the fuel in when the body needs it. Most of us put the fuel in when the body doesn't do it. I mean, does it make sense to you that you get your work done and then you eat? It doesn't work that way with my lawnmower. It'll sit there and not run a bit if I don't put any gas in it. Maybe you have the same experience, you know. They lost 20 to 30, those who lost 20 to 30 pounds, so 3 months in this group, 6 months in this group, showed an increase in hemoglobin level. Now what would you expect on a diet like this? Probably more anemic, they're getting more puny, they don't have any food to eat because we're starving them to death, and here these people have more hemoglobin. Blood sugar levels of diabetic patients who lost 30 pounds or more were normal. Incredible stuff. Hypothyroid patients, by the way, Synthroid is probably one of the most common medications in the United States. Hypothyroid patients showed a reduction in daily thyroid maintenance or medication requirements. So wait a minute. What in the world does losing weight and eating correctly have to do with your thyroid? Maybe let me turn around the other way. Most people in America that are taking thyroid medication don't need it. If, here's the if, they want to change their life. Anyway, really interesting research. Dr. Capps is one of those old docs. He's practiced, he said, during 7 decades. So to do the math, that means this doc has been in practice for at least 61 years. To bridge 7 decades, you have to be in practice for at least 61 years. The Chinese basic 4. The American basic 4 is meat, milk, fruits and vegetables, and cereal grains. The Chinese basic 4 is green leafy vegetables, soybean products, sweet potatoes, and cereal. So we're going to talk about how to be Chinese. And they still blow it. Green leafy vegetables, 500 grams. A pound is 454 grams. So they're eating over a pound of vegetables. That may seem like a lot, but when you put it on a plate and cook it down, it's really not that much. They get 5 grams of protein. Their soybean products, they're eating about 2 ounces of tofu or whatever, about 30 grams per ounce. They get 18 grams of protein from those 60 grams. Sweet potatoes, about 400 grams, a little less than a pound, about 8. And their rice, mostly, their cereals, 400, for about 40 grams. So now you see my theory, right? I said you get more protein from your breads and cereal group than you get from your other groups when you're vegetarian. So look at their total. 71 grams of protein a day. Remember what we talked about earlier? 20 to 35? They're still over. And most people look at that and they go, well, that's a real deficient diet. How can they live on that? I'm going, how can't they? Back to the Adventist health study. Risk ratio in Seventh-day Adventist men. It gets close to home. It gets a little bit touchy. Use of meat and risk ratio. Eating meat less than once a day, less than 1 day per week, so less than once per week, their risk ratio is 1. Which means some in this group did have diabetes. They died from diabetes. But compared to the group who ate meat almost daily, they were 1/4, or this group had 4 times the amount. All within the Adventist health study, all within the same population. Meat versus less meat. Not vegan here. I wish I had the vegan line up here. I don't have that. I'm not even sure if that research is available. We talked about this morning. I won't cover it again. This is the slide that shows for increase in animal protein, increase in diabetes. Many people believe that if they're low in protein, they need to eat more protein. Well, let's take a look at kidney patients. Kidney filtering ability, meaning how well your kidneys are able to filter the blood, take out the impurities, and take care of you. If we look at their filtering ability, this is coming through in lab work now. Maybe some of you know, they call it GFR, glomerular filtration rate, or eGFR, which is estimated glomerular filtration, because it truly is an estimate. They didn't stick a needle in there and check your kidney flow. But these patients were losing their kidney function big time. They were down to about 50% or 50 milliliters per minute, not doing well at all on a typical American diet. These people, if they continue up, are looking at dialysis. That's what they're looking at. So, what did they do? Change their diet. 1 year of a low-protein diet. First of all, after 1 year, they hadn't lost any more kidney function. That's goal one. No more loss. Second goal is I like to see it to go up. This is a low-protein diet, increases blood protein in diabetics. Now, wait a minute. The diabetic protein level for albumin, am I doing something wrong here? For albumin was about 3.5, 3.6, and they would consider that low. So we changed the diet, put them on a low-protein diet, and 1 year later, their albumin level was about 4.2 or 4.3. See, because diabetics, when their kidneys deteriorate, they start losing their protein right out through their kidneys. They call it microalbuminemia. They're actually checking the protein in their urine. By the way, you're not supposed to have any protein in your urine, or very, very minuscule. This group here, on a low-protein diet, stopped overworking the kidneys, and they were successfully able to raise their blood serum in the bloodstream level of protein. So even in a patient that is that has a low level on their lab test, don't give them a high-protein diet. You'll mess them up worse. You'll cause them to lose it quicker. One more. No, I got beyond this. Low-protein diet reduces urine protein. Remember I told you it's supposed to be 0. These are patients that are extremely sick here. Urine protein, milligrams per deciliter. They're putting out over 2,000 milligrams of protein in a 24-hour period. In 1 year's time on a low-protein diet, they went from 2,000 down to 100. I could write a patient's name on here because I'm treating one right now. I'm sitting there going, hopefully my mouth doesn't hang open too wide. I'm just, it's actually fun to practice medicine with God a little bit because you go, thank you, Lord. Sure appreciate you helping them out. Because I watched him go from 4,000 down to 50, 43, 57. I mean, you start going, what's happening here? Is this man going to be dialysis the rest of his life, or is this going to respond? And when it responds, I'm going, God's taking care of you. Remember that quote that we read this morning? God's in charge of every cell. Well, I think he worked on a few of them for this dear brother. Yes, ma'am.
When a person gets to the dialysis, can they do something like if they change their diet, maybe reversible?
No, when a person gets what now?
To have dialysis.
When they have dialysis, it depends what kidney they have left. So sometimes people go on dialysis before they need to. But if their kidney is totally damaged or scarred or removed, then there isn't a lot of hope. But you really want to cover that with them before they start going for dialysis. On the other hand, let's be fair. What diet can you eat that will cause you to have the least amount of toxins build up in your bloodstream that the dialysis treatment takes out? Dialysis is clean you up, let you build up, and clean you up. Now, peritoneal dialysis, where they inject fluid in your abdomen, works like a charcoal poultice on the outside, and it kind of pulls the fluid out over a period of time, so it's not just a matter of 3 hours, clean you up, see you in 2 days, clean you up, and so you're always on a seesaw. You leave out of there a week, by the next morning you feel halfway decent, have a good day, then you're looking at going back and sitting by the machine for 3 hours again, feeling rotten, and then coming up. So, the best thing I can tell you is I have not had a lot of dialysis patients to work with. If I do, I'd highly recommend they put a charcoal poultice over their abdomen every night and prolong how frequently they need the dialysis. My brother worked in nephrology for years, but I wasn't able to have a lot of takers on the charcoal method, so I don't know. Blood pressure, on a low-protein diet. The systolic blood pressure here is about 62. It dropped to in the high 40s or 50s. The lower number was probably about 83, and it dropped to about 76, 77. Every time you go through, over and over again, sometimes I get to go to vegetarian conferences. And first of all, you get really proud because someone will get up there that knows little to nothing about Adventists, and they'll talk about the Adventist health study. And these Adventists that have decreased their cancer rate by 50% by what they do, and they do this and they do this. And the next speaker gets up and says, here's what you have to do to take care of your kidney patients, be a vegetarian. The next person gets up and says, what do you have to do to avoid cancer, be a vegetarian. By the end of the seminar, you go, you don't even need to stand up because I know what you're going to say. So you feel pretty good about it, but that's the research out there. Like I said, we don't need more experimentation, we need more people to do the program. Percentage change, baseline from weight. The reason I show you this slide is I want to show you how fast it can happen. Weight is in the squares. Glucose level, sugar level, is in the circles. Sugar level is on this side. This says percent change. Now, not milligram change, this is percent change from baseline glucose. So let's look at baseline. Up here, we're starting, and we got 0 change. Over here, we've lost 0 weight. Let's come down to week 1. We have lost 3 pounds. Pretty good week. But losing 3 pounds, okay, the body is in a caloric deficit state. It's starting to starve, so to speak, however you want to say it. I want to look, this is incredible. Glucose is not at 9 over here. You've got to come to this chart over here. They've had a percentage change of 42% change. I mean, do you realize what that is? This is my patient that walked to my office at 500 blood sugar. And he said, I'm not going to the hospital, and I'm not taking insulin. So the next question is, what are you going to do? And I love this statement. I'll eat cardboard if I have to. Good, you're my kind of man. And he was serious. I said, okay, you get nothing but vegetables. He said, I don't know. No, he didn't say that at all. He'd go, I'll do it. No, there was no argument. I'll do it. And his wife made him vegetable soup until it probably about came out his ears. 2 weeks later, comes back to the office, blood sugar 168. Now that is not normal, folks, but it sure beats 500. Look what he did. He had about a 60 or 65% drop in those 2 weeks. This group here, similar, okay? Once again, at the 2-week point, they've lost 5 pounds. Their blood sugar is half what it was, 50% change. They come along and watch what happens here. But notice what happened in the first week. Totally changed how the body looks at insulin resistance. That quick. Dr. Horowitz out of Emory, we're talking about the medical complex there in Atlanta, Georgia. Diabetics come in and guess what his treatment is? They don't spend much on food. You know why? They don't get any. The first week, they fast them. They get their water, they get their minerals, they get their electrolytes, they get their vitamins. They are well taken care of from a nutrient standpoint, but they're not getting food. At the end of the 5 days, basically all of them are off their insulin. Of course, this is the type 2, the ones that really didn't need it. In 5 days. Now, if they leave there and stop at the IHOP and get ice cream on their apple pie, you can see what's going to happen, don't you? They just wasted their money and the doctor's time. It can happen that quick. We don't recommend that dire of a change because there could be a problem. But this is not a dire change. 3 pounds weight loss in a week is not abnormal for going on cabbage. The BMI, I thought I had my BMI chart with me. Let me just click forward. I don't. Body mass index is an index of your weight compared to your height ratio. We'd like you to be at 25 or less. That is very liberal. For example, I'll use myself. For my height, for my weight, at 25 BMI level, I would be weighing about 170 and they tell me I was fine. I'm not fine at 170. I'm fine at 150. So you could weigh 20 pounds more than what you should. So what I'm trying to tell you, they're being liberal with this number. So the group, here's where I'm at basically. So the group with a BMI of less than 20 is going to be considered what most Americans consider slightly underweight. A rough rule of thumb is for ladies, the first 5 feet, we want you to weigh 100 pounds. For each inch over that, you add 5 pounds to that. If you're large frame, you go up 10% above that. If you're small frame, you're 10% below that. That's some rough numbers. For men, first 5 feet, 100 pounds. 6 pounds for each inch over that. Just give you some rough rule. So if you're 5'10", they would tell me to weigh 160. Lady, 5'10", you'd weigh 150. Okay, so this is relative risk for diabetes. I want you to see that as we go up the, so to speak, getting more and more overweight, you see what happens here. And we keep going along, until we get all the way to, if you're greater than 40 on the BMI, you're almost 100% risk. In other words, 95 out of 100 have the problem. That's an unfortunate risk ratio. Exercise, the more you exercise, you decrease your risk of diabetes and also blood pressure. Equivalence, I tell people to walk. This is walking equivalence to other forms of exercise. So if you jog a mile or walk a mile, guess what? It's the same equivalent. Except that, exactly right. Man's correct.
And you don't
You move.
unless you're really pushing yourself.
Yeah.
You don't get that glow.
Yeah. Walking and jogging burns the same amount of calories. You just get there quicker. But cardiovascular workout brought up a good point. Am I perspiring? And that is, you may have to push harder. But I'm not going to tell my dear lady who's 80 years old to go out for a jog. I'm thankful she's walking. And if she can't walk quick enough to perspire, then we have plenty of hills in western North Carolina that all of us perspire without jogging if we choose to. Biking 3 miles, swimming 10 minutes, rowing machine 12 minutes, stationary bike, aerobics, active tennis, and active racquetball. I don't know who this guy was playing with, but if it takes him 20 minutes of racquetball to be equivalent to 1 mile of walking, he's not playing with the right, he needs a little more competition. The guys I play with, we're drenched. Yes, ma'am.
I was just thinking of another exercise and then I just lost it.
Okay. Catch me later. This chart may seem not very predictive, but it's an important chart. And it's going to take some explanation. Once again, your fasting blood sugar, between 70 and 100, they're going to call you totally normal, and that's what you want. This phase, the second phase here, is when you become diabetic. The question is, at what point do you really become diabetic? By definition, by medical definition, you become diabetic at this point when your fasting blood sugar goes above a certain criteria. But my question again, when did you become diabetic? Here's what I propose. Notice it says 10 to 30 years. I propose that you become diabetic when you've got glucose intolerance. Now, how do we define glucose intolerance? Well, we have to do a few testing. First of all, what we test is insulin production. And when insulin production starts to go up, guess what? You're diabetic. You can predict diabetes at least 5 years ahead of time before the fasting blood sugar does anything. How about a warning? How would you like to say your doctor says, ma'am, you're becoming diabetic if you continue down this same road? Because if you keep on this road, in 10 years from now, you're going to be asking me for a medication. But I'm telling you 10 years ahead of time. So we actually have that kind of predictability right now. This is not unusual. This is easy. So, this phase right here is where I want to catch people. By the time the blood sugar is high, that's when I see them. I've already got a reduction in insulin production. I've got a pancreas that's already tired and trying to pull them back. I've got insulin resistance that's continuing to go up, and I've got fasting blood sugars that are continuing to rise. So I've got a problem here. So this is the area where I think doctors should start diagnosing the problem and not call this borderline or iffy or whatever and allow you to pass their test with a fasting blood sugar. It's not even fair. It's ridiculous. Think of this. You go to the office, you fasted for 8 to 12 hours. You definitely didn't eat your ice cream, hopefully, before that because you want a good test this year. You walk in there after 8 to 12 hours of fasting, you do a blood sugar level, and you come out okay. Well, the rest of the year, when do you fast for 8 to 10 hours? Never. So we've got an artificial test with an artificial level, and you look bad. It is not a valid test. Insulin resistance. Remember I was telling you the various levels this morning. Insulin resistance at the brain causes you to have increased food intake due to the insulin resistance. What is your brain calling for? I need glucose. I need fuel. I'm dying up here. Will you please eat something? And the reason you eat something is because you're not getting proper glucose up there. And it's confusing to the brain. So the brain keeps telling you to eat. And you get more overweight and you get insulin resistance. In the liver, you get increased glucose production, and of course it gets high in the bloodstream, increases in the plasma. Active muscle, inefficiency of glucose uptake. Insulin resistance to the muscle level, you can't take it up. So it's going to stay in the bloodstream. And the fat cells is actually the last place and the last ditch effort for the body. The last ditch effort for the body to save you is make you fat. And you go, I thought that was the first thing. I'm going, no. You already lost your brain, you lost your liver, and you lost your muscle already. You're working on the last one. And so when you see the insulin resistance at the adipose level, we have a problem here. And of course, insulin resistance and decreased beta cell function. So your pancreas continues to obviously have a problem.
If we go too much further, then we're here. I just remember the exercise in the previous one. Yeah. How about if you had a rebounder and you wanted to do that exercise?
A rebounder is going to be similar to walking, except easier on your knees. And the bounce you get probably will require a few less calories than walking on pavement. So it would be slightly less than walking. The different types of glucose testing. Fasting blood sugar is your worst criteria to judge how you're doing. And that's what we use every time. That was bad. Not a bad idea. The second thing is a glucose tolerance test. Well, that's called torture. Because we give you more sugar than I hope you ever eat in the whole year. We give you somewhere around 100 grams of sugar. That's like giving you a half a cup of pure sugar, and we mix it up in a drink so you can get it down without gagging too bad. 100 grams of sugar, and then we watch you for the next 2, 3, 4, sometimes up to 6 hours, and we watch what happens to the whole thing. And you come out at the end and we say you're diabetic. I'm going, you don't need to do that to them. What an insult. You changed their genes for at least a month. So, this one is not, it's accurate as far as the number it gives you. It is not a good test to determine where you're at. This should be off the list. A glucose tolerance test is absolutely unnecessary, and any doctor who wants to run on you, just say, no thank you. I will do a 2-hour postprandial test. I will eat a meal, come in here, and stick my arm out, and you can check me, because that's a functional test that tells you how well I'm eating or not. And you can find out all about yourself right here to find out if that meal messed you up or helped you. You can do it at home if you got your own glucometer. You can do it at the doctor's office or at the laboratory. Excellent test. This is the one that I expect. When I treat a diabetic, the first goal is I want them to have a normal fasting blood sugar. That's goal number 1. When that happens, goal number 2 is I want you to have a normal 2-hour postprandial. And that means 140 or less after 2 hours after you eat your meal. Now we go to 3, glycosylated, or here's talking about A1C, glycosylated hemoglobin. You're seeing a change in laboratory medicine. Laboratory medicine is now looking at the body to tell us what to do. Does that make sense? In other words, what indicators does the body have that I'm doing something wrong? Well, this A1C, this is hemoglobin A, probably your most common. And it changes into this form here depending on how much sugar is floating around your bloodstream. So now we've got an inside man, we've got an inside marker that lets me know. So the more that you convert to this form here, guess what? The higher sugar has to be. Here's the other point. Once A cell, a red blood cell with a hemoglobin in it, once a cell is converted to this kind, guess what? Doesn't go back. So I have a permanent marker of your peaks. So when it goes up, it gives me a reading, so to speak. So now, at the end of the month, when I do this, or at the end of 3 months, when you have it checked, red blood cells live for 120 days. Therefore, if you behave yourself for 4 months, you should have all new red blood cells. All the ones that were tagged with this one should be all gone by then. Most doctors run the A1C every 3 months. Technically, they would give you a better report if you did every 4 months. Unless you're not behaving yourself, then why have your blood done? So the A1C, as it comes down, tells me that you are not only doing okay fasting, postprandial, you're not having your sugar spikes. That's why that one's so critical. If this one is elevated, then we've got a problem on our hands. But it still doesn't give us the underlying cause yet until we get to this one right here. Your blood insulin level will have to go up. And when it goes up, it'll try to correct for this, this, and still make you look good. So this is still the premier test right here of seeing where you're at. If we see blood insulin levels going up when they shouldn't, we go, I'm sorry. Doesn't matter if all the rest of the numbers looking good, just means you're making up for it. Insulin antibodies, quite rare, but you can actually have antibodies against your insulin. Doesn't let your insulin work right in your body, and your body makes a lot of it. That would be an autoimmune disease. C-peptide test are for those that were trying to figure out how much insulin their body is making. C-peptide stands for the peptide, the protein part that breaks off insulin when you make it. When your pancreas makes insulin, it's in the inactive form. When it comes out into the bloodstream, it gets activated. This little tail, this C-peptide, this piece of the protein, well, insulin's a protein, this part of the protein breaks off. So, let's say a patient walks in, they are an insulin-dependent diabetic, they give them a shot of insulin that morning, and they go, you think I can ever get off this stuff? I'm going, I'm not sure. Let's find out. We do a C-peptide test, and I see that they're making insulin. Now, how do I know they're making insulin? Because the insulin they're injecting doesn't have this on it. And the insulin their body makes, this breaks off and floats around the bloodstream. So I'm going, hey, your C-peptide is normal. You're making enough insulin. You don't need to be injecting it. When are you going to behave yourself so you don't need it? And for men, I tell them I'm trying to make them into a Toyota instead of a Cadillac. And now you ladies may not understand, but what it means is miles per gallon. If I put a gallon of gas in my Toyota, I go down the road 40 miles. I put it in my Cadillac, I go down 10 miles. Well, when it comes to insulin, I want you to go the 40 miles. So I'm trying to lean you out, so to speak. By the way, I'm not here to wear you all out. It is getting late. We'll cover a few more. Do any of you have questions? Just actually stop me, raise your hand. We'll do our best we can. Sleep deprivation affects insulin resistance. Men who slept 4 hours a night ate 22% more calories the following day than after they slept for 8 hours. This is America. We are sleep deprived, and we're eating far too much. And sleep-deprived people have a suppressed metabolic rate. So they eat more food, and they don't burn the fuel as quickly. It's also called easier to be overweight. Also found that a single night of only 4 hours of sleep led to insulin resistance in 75% of the men and women in their 40s that were tested. These aren't diabetics. These are people that would not be considered diabetic, had insulin resistance because of sleep deprivation. A diabetic who isn't sleeping is a whole other issue. They were less able to move sugar into their cells, that's insulin resistance, and then insulin resistance can lead to heart disease, diabetes, and breast cancer. In sleep and insulin resistance, here's insulin concentration in nanomoles, 4.5 hours of sleep, look at their insulin level, versus when they were 8.5 hours, look at their insulin level. Therefore, I've got insulin resistance in this group because they only slept 4 hours that night. Sleep is not optional. When God turns the lights out, you're supposed to be sleeping. So this time of the year, why do you think you should sleep more than in the summer? Interesting, isn't it? Why does God have longer, dark, light cycles at different times of the year? So we're all going to move to the equator, right, and get straightened out.
What if, sometimes I sleep like 4 hours, like from 7 to 11, and then I would get up, I'm going to be able to go back to sleep until 2, and then I have to get up at 7.
So you have a split schedule.
Yes, I don't have 8 hours sleep straight.
Well, this doesn't address that, except that when you have a split schedule, the quality of sleep is not as good. So what are we going to do to keep you asleep? Have you exercised so you get so tired when you wake up you go back to bed, right?
Exercise.
Seriously.
That's the one. Exercise.
Most of us have more mental work than physical work. And to have good quality sleep, you have to be actually physically as well as mentally tired. And then some of us have so much stress on our back, we're not going to sleep no matter what we do. So that's a whole other issue. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause here. The reason being is because this is all about how to, well, this isn't fair to some of you. We'll do a few of these quickly. Obviously, weight control is step number 1 for diabetics, and a bunch of data here. I want to go through to a few other things. This is the Harvard nurses study, type 2 diabetics, low fiber diet versus high fiber diet. Harvard study on men, 100 grams of unprocessed red meat caused less problem in diabetics than half of that in processed meat, and most people are eating the processed meat these days. Eating good fats, I think we've talked about that. Increased carbohydrate and fiber in the diet reduces cholesterol, blood pressure, insulin requirements, risk of death, improves gastrointestinal function, don't need a laxative, reduces body weight, reduces risk of kidney damage, improves glycemic control, blood sugar control. Benefits of eating cabbage. It's going to sound like snake oil here. Cancer, diabetes, heart disease, headache, excess weight, skin disorders. There you go. If you want your skin to look good. I'm so glad it's inexpensive. Eczema, jaundice, scurvy, rheumatism, arthritis, gout, eye disorders, constipation, stomach ulcers, and Alzheimer's disease. See, being a vegetarian, when I grew up as a kid, they used to call us cabbage heads. So maybe they weren't too far off. Huh? Diabetic benefits of a high-carb diet. Reduces cholesterol, blood pressure, promotes discontinuation of insulin therapy for non-insulin dependent. Please remember that one. Reduces risk for heart disease, gastrointestinal, reduces weight, kidney disease, insulin, and glycemic index, activity. Let me cover this and then I will quit. The concept of buffer foods is important for all of us. This concept is how fast your refined carbohydrates get into your system. That's why I said foods that slow intestinal absorption of glucose. The foods that slow intestinal amount in any form, no matter what you're trying to do, is fats. Fat in the stomach is processed by about 10 grams per hour. So I think I've told you my story about the truck stop, but I'll do it again. On my way to work, there's a truck stop. And they have signs out there like manager special. And that really is a special. 1 pound of steak, that's 16 ounces, fries and drink. So I go 1 pound of steak. Each pound of steak, each ounce of steak has about 10 grams of fat. So a 16-ounce steak, it means it's in the stomach for at least 16 hours. But hey, these guys are out there driving the truck, and you expect them to stay on the road.
Yeah.
And then they have their French fries, another 4 hours in the stomach, and they get a milkshake for a drink, another 4. They literally can have food in that stomach for 24 hours. Now, whatever you put in the stomach is still there 24 hours later. It's not worth eating. So I'm going, these poor guys, how do they stay awake on the road with all this fermentation and alcohol running through their vessels? So fats in any form slow down how fast things are absorbed. So let's apply that to a healthy diet, to being a diabetic. If you eat a soybean, guess what you got? You got fat, protein, and fiber all in one deal. I like it. All three of them done. Fats in any form, whether it's avocados, whether it's olives, whether it's nuts, whether it's seeds, will slow down and buffer. So what's a good idea for a diabetic? Well, as for good diabetic control, why don't you eat some almonds with each meal? Unless you're trying to lose weight. You've got to work on that first. Protein is another buffer food, and diabetics used to be fed high fat, high protein, and no carbs when I came out of school. When I came out of school, I did my doctorate dissertation on diabetes, and I said, okay, I'm going to start feeding them carbohydrates. And guess what? The people got better. That was back in the 1970s, though. So, protein is also a buffer food. So when I feed them an almond, I get protein and fat, don't I? God knows how to do things. Or if I feed them a soybean, I get my protein component there. And then complex carbohydrate means basically non-refined carbohydrates. Broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, beets, corn, you name it. Out through. Some diabetics cannot tolerate white potatoes, even with the skin on, and you'll have to find out who you are. Sometimes it still pushes them too hard. Or say you can have a sweet potato, or at least try a sweet potato. It pushes them too hard. So there is some individual variation even to what I'm talking about. I'm going to stop here for questions or comments. I think I've done about enough talking. Yes.
When I started insulin, I went to look at the pharmacy, and the pharmacist was saying, what do you eat and stuff? And I was telling her that I should leave corn and
Some diabetics cannot tolerate corn. What I would do is I would try whole corn on the cob and check your sugar. Now, if you got cream corn that's already sweetened in a can from a store, I will guarantee that won't be as good. I really don't know yet, because corn is high fiber. It has some protein and some fat. Some diabetics can tolerate it, and some diabetics can't. So it all depends on your sugar level. Some people digest their food quicker than others. It goes through. So there's this individual variation. But no diabetic has a problem with cabbage. I know, I'm going to wear it out, okay?
My son came to my house and he was...
We live near a farmer's market, and if you're broke, I'll guarantee you this. You can go to McDonald's and spend $5 and get one meal, and it'll be not worth eating. Or you can take your $5 and go to the grocery store and buy 5 pounds of brown rice and 5 pounds of pinto beans. And at the end of the week, my poor buddy has one meal at McDonald's, and I've had at least 1 or 2 meals every day for the whole week. I think I'm going to come out ahead. But I was also raised in a very poor home, and I understand what the value of beans and rice are. And I really feel for the young people. I don't think they can make it. I don't think they could make it on $5 a week of food. I think they would really have a problem.
We used to say we were poor because we didn't have a lot of meat. You know, we eat a lot of beans and rice
And a little bit of pig.
Yeah, and we used to say we thought we were poor because we couldn't have steak. But I guess we were right at that time. We were rich.
No. Out of necessity, you were getting healthier. But like when I first started my lecture this morning, people think that having your steak means you're wealthy or you're well-to-do. The Oriental races actually think it's a rebuke when they have to eat brown rice. Because white rice to them is status. I'm going, it may be status, but throw status out the window.
That's right.
Because I'll take health, and if you avoid the bran, if you avoid the germ and the coating outside the rice. I mean, ricetrine is what? What they feed those babies that are having dysentery in those countries that get rice. They out there and pound the rice to get the hull off the rice and discard this stuff. The poor mothers would go out there and take that and make a gruel out of it and feed it to these babies that were going to die because of dysentery and watch them start to thrive. Their bowel could handle it. They could get the nutrition they need. It would slow down, allow the bowel to absorb the fluid, and these kids start getting healthier. So what does America do? They make a supplement called ricetrine and want to sell it to you for big bucks. You go, wait a minute. You were throwing this stuff away before. How about free? You know? Yes, sir.
Yeah, something similar happened in Mexico because of the status of using white flour tortillas instead of corn tortillas with the beans.
Yeah.
So the poor people had the corn and the beans,
Yeah.
and they were healthy, so they got a little bit of money, so they could buy the white flour and got less healthy.
But look what's happened in our country. The Mexicans that have moved here are the most obese population. 82% of the Mexican population is overweight. 78% of the black population is overweight, Afro-American. 68 or 67% of the Caucasian population is overweight. We're all too fat. But there are certain groups that do not tolerate our diet. And in that area, as far as obesity, the Mexicans as a race don't tolerate what we're doing to them. And I watch them. I watch them work hard. I watch them sweat. And I watch them with their big belly. I'm going, what are they doing at night? They can't be eating tomatoes. Maybe they got the six-pack. I don't know what's going on. But the point is that they're putting way too many calories in. They can't tolerate it.
I think it's all the flour.
What's that?
The flour, the tortilla.
Well, like he was saying, if you use a white flour tortilla, how healthy is that compared to good old corn? Because in the corn, you had something that was actually healthy. You actually had a lot more fiber, and you're not going to eat as many. See, high fiber foods have a natural, what I call gag factor. You mean, well, how many apples can you eat before you've had enough? I mean, if all you have is apples to eat, how many can you make it through? 10? 5? 3? Okay? So see, variety also breeds overeating as a general rule. That's why you have to be careful at potlucks. But when God built a food, almost every food that He's built has a natural gag factor. I missed your hand. Go ahead, sir.
You said that completely. You said that for glucose intolerance.
Yes.
You mentioned also insulin deficiency. So when it's insulin deficient, what happens to the pancreas at that time?
I'm not following you. Give me that again. I'm not hearing well either.
When we say it's insulin deficient, what happens to the pancreas at that time?
Okay, a few things are happening. Number one, in the child diabetic, they actually get a pancreas that's destroyed. Okay, that's one whole area. In the adult onset diabetic, the insulin is continuing to be produced at excessive quantities over time, and it basically stops producing that much because you've worn it out. It loses the capability. The cells, the islet cells of Langerhans, basically stop producing. It's just non-functional. What happens to them? I don't know if they totally disappear, if they atrophy and start to go away. I'm not sure. But they actually have less production.
So in that case, that's the type 2.
That's type 2.
Now, some people have to take insulin for type 2.
No, they don't.
They don't. They take the pill.
No,
What do they do?
they don't have to do either. It's called they want to eat.
But
And so they give them insulin because they go, the goal here is criteria. So to get your blood sugar down, we're going to give you more insulin to make up for what your body isn't making. I'm going, wait a minute, why don't you tell them that their body is making insulin, and why don't you eat within your budget? So there's a lot of type 2s, you're right, that take a shot with the metformin or glyburide or glipizide or whatever, because what they do is their pancreas is in a state of failure. But instead of telling them they're going to fail and mess up, they don't want to hear that, so they start giving them insulin. Which means what that does?
So,
It just pushes them down the road faster.
so if they're type 2,
Yes.
say they're lean and they're not overweight. So what
If they are not overweight and their pancreas is producing enough, then it's a matter of eating foods that allow them to stay within that range. They may be having a pancreas that's diseased to the point where they may not be producing enough. That's why we do the C-peptide test, so I know where they're at. So, but very few type 2 diabetics are lean.
Right, I know.
That is the unusual. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, now my doctor told me I need to pick up 5 pounds. So I started using a lot of honey. What's bad about honey?
Oh, wait a minute. pick up 5 pounds. You don't mean let weights, you're talking about put some weight on.
Yeah.
Well, I don't listen to doctors that tell you to put weight on unless you are low energy or if you continue to lose weight on me. But if you've been at 100 pounds for 5 years, I'm not going to tell you you have to go to 105.
I lost weight. A normal weight, I used to weigh about 140, I'm down to 125, I'm not on a diet.
Congratulations.
But I don't want, I
It's a
want
banana.
No, let me tell you, this whole weight thing is interesting.
Right.
Some people feel they're going to blow away until you look at them. And there's no blowing away. You know, I had this lady walk in the office and go, if I get any thinner, I'm just going to go, look at me, look at my arms. Well, their arms look good. I'm not looking at their arms, though. My point is, how tall are you?
5, I shrunk. I was 5'5", I'm down to 5'4".
Okay, we'll give you credit for 5'4".
When you get older, I have, what you call spinal stenosis, and you do shrink. So,
We all shrink. I'm not as tall as I used to be. Hopefully, don't shrink too quick. So let's do the numbers, okay? 5'4", the first 5 feet, I'm going to give you 100 pounds. For each inch over that, I'm going to give you 5 pounds. That means you should weigh 120.
well, I'm about 125.
Congratulations. You're in great shape. Please don't try to get to 130. There's no value in putting fat.
aiming for 130. And
No, ma'am.
I started eating soy ice cream, and I'm using lots of honey.
Well, I like soy ice cream, and honey tastes good, but you don't need to put weight on. It's a misconcept. If the whole world around you is obese and you're the only thin paste in the world, you're going to feel like something's wrong with you.
And another thing, I don't take a lot of the medication that she prescribed. And I told her I eat.
Well, if you don't listen to the doctor in that area, don't listen to him yet. Or don't listen to him at all.
Well, it's a lady doctor.
Well, they're still a doctor. They're starting to go through medical school. Here's my point. People who live the longest take no drugs. So whenever you are put on a drug, ask the question, is this going to increase my longevity or is this going to kill me quicker? Almost every conclusion you'll come to is that you will do better without the drug.
Now,
Amen.
another thing, I
Amen.
had glaucoma.
Now that's another story.
Yeah, now, the other doctor, eye doctor, well, then I was listening to a prayer line, on the prayer line.
Yes.
They told me to bring down pressure, to put lemon juice. I said, that gives me a heart attack.
Well, some people...
I couldn't put lemon juice in. Using my eye.
Don't do everything you hear, okay?
Yeah.
Because I've had people that make a solution of cayenne and put the drops in their eye.
Jesus.
Now, the unique thing, it wasn't for cataract. It wasn't for glaucoma. It was for cataract. The interesting thing is, this lady I'm telling you about never had to have cataract surgery, but her husband went and had the surgery. I don't make that recommendation because I think that it is very irritating to the eye. But back to glaucoma again. Glaucoma is an increase in production of the vitreous humor. The fluid and gel inside the eye is being overproduced, or it's not being filtered out at the right rate. So you've got a lack of balance here. You've got more production, or you've got less coming out. You wind up with a pressure in the eye. What I don't want is for the macula area of your eye to get so much pressure on it that it's like putting pressure on your ulnar, your radial nerve here until the hand starts going numb. I don't want that happening inside your eye because of the increased pressure and you lose your ability to see. So I'm very picky about eyes, and the glaucoma medication typically will not shorten your life and may help you to see for the rest of your life. So if there's no other way to reduce the pressure, well, one must not be working, otherwise they wouldn't give you 2 more. What I would ask the doctor is which one of these is going to work the most effective for me, because sometimes doctors get in the habit of adding another one without taking any away and adding another one. Well, if these first 2 don't work, then throw them out the window if the third one works. So I don't know which one works, so I don't know your medical history, but I'd take the least amount that I could. But I do want you to have your eyes. You know, I've been through one retinal detachment myself and surgery and everything, so I am very appreciative that I can see.
Well, they did a laser surgery on my left eye,
Yes.
and I told them I'm having slight flashes, and they wanted to do it. I said, no, I don't want to do it on my right eye until this one here will clear up. So,
And you are not diabetic? Good.
I have never been told that.
Anyway,
in other words,
I don't think you need to gain 5 pounds, and I'd like to make sure you can see, so make sure you're doing what you need
My
to.
blood pressure, they said, stays slightly low.
Congratulations.
That's right.
Other things can help you with your eye pressure, okay? Number 1, being well hydrated. Do you drink enough water?
Not on Sabbath, because I don't.
The restrooms across the road, I found.
I keep rushing out.
I understand.
I use distilled water, so I keep rushing out and forgetting about it.
Okay, if you're going to drink distilled water, you must take extra minerals. Otherwise, you will demineralize yourself. So consider that. If you're well hydrated, you're helping the eye out. The next thing is, by decreasing the salt, specifically sodium, in your diet, you can help the eye out. By increasing the potassium, your fruits and vegetables, you can help the eye out. So do everything you can to lower the pressure. But don't lose your vision just because you say, I'm not going to take a drop. Those drops are very specific, right to the eye. They're going to cause the least effect on the rest of your body. So I'm not in for losing vision at all. In fact, I've invested more money in one eye than you can believe you need to, but I can see. I'm grateful to my surgeon. I'm glad he had the skill to put things back together inside the eye.
Amen.
So. All the way in the back.
Now my question changed because
Your question changed, okay.
After you said that right now she's 5'4" and she's 125,
Yeah.
and I think that I'm 5'5". Before I had my children, when I was single, I was 110. After I had my 4 children, now I'm 53. I'm at 118. That means that all my life I've been underweight.
No, weight is really a poor criteria for health. Let's start with that, okay? Most of the time, what I'm looking for in weight is I've got to evaluate how much fat you've got, how much muscle you've got, and what's your bone structure like. Most Americans are too fat, period. They carry too much fat with them. Now, you can be too fat at 120 and 5'4". I'm looking at percent body fat here. In other words, you can have very little muscle, have too much fat, and get on the scale, and they'll tell you you're fine. I'm going, no, they're not. They're 20% fat, and they should be 16% fat. So they're carrying 4% too much fat. They need to gain 4% muscle. The weight number on the scale is fine. But see, that just weighs all of you. It doesn't tell me how much skeleton you've got. It doesn't tell me anything about you. This BMI that I was showing you, that is a little bit different concept. That looks at like a height to weight ratio, a little bit closer. But the old skin fold test, can you pinch an inch, or we use various body size, will estimate how much fat you're carrying. It's the fat that I'm concerned about, not your muscle, not your bones. If you're at the right percent body fat and you weigh 150, I would say congratulations. You go, oh, don't do that to me, because we got a number locked in our head. Now, what if you were very muscular, or you're one of those ladies who are bodybuilders, and really, and you weighed 150, I would tell you, you're fine for your health. Because you say, well, our percent body fat is 12%. I'm going, well, ma'am, you are just fine. If you want to build a body like that and lift weights like that, why should I stop you? Health is not the number on the scale. Health is your percentage of body fat versus muscle. That's what I'm concerned with. So if you guys want to find out where you're at with your fat, where you're at with your muscle, use a percent body fat and forget the numbers on the scale. Because it's not valid. The new scale that my wife got home, I can step on it now with bare feet, and guess what it tells me? It tells me how fat I am. It will actually give me my percent body fat. It'll give me my BMI, and I've never told it anything. Yeah. What? Well, you have to have bare feet because, see, what they're testing percent body fat now is called impedance testing. So when the electrical current goes through my body, I'm not getting electrocuted. When the current goes through your body, fat tissue takes current different than muscle tissue. So it gives me an estimate of how much fat, how much muscle. Once again, it's an estimate. If you really want to do this scientifically, it's called underwater weighing. Fat floats, muscle sinks, okay? So when we put you in water, this is what we did at Loma Linda. Okay. You have a dunk tank. You put them in water, you have them breathe out, and you completely submerge them below water. It's not that bad. It's like jumping in a swimming pool in reverse. And you're sitting on a scale. So we read how much do you weigh when you're totally submerged underwater. The less you weigh, or quote, the more you float, the more fat you have. The more you weigh underwater, the more muscle you have. That's really the scientific way to do it. Or another way to do it is dispersion. You measure the water level in the tank. It's at this level. We stick you in it, and we see how high the water goes for your weight. And we go, okay, for a person that weighs this much, that has muscle, it only goes this high. For a person who weighs this much and has this much fat, it goes this high. Fat takes up more space than muscle. Anyway, I'm getting too scientific. Get yourself a caliper and measure your skin folds if you want to. A lot of gymnasiums do it. Because they want you to come in, they're going to measure here and here, and they want to show you lost 15 inches, but they took 15 sites, make you feel good. No, not really, but anyway. They will do basic percent body fat, and that is probably the most accurate thing you can do to tell that number on the scale is where you need to be. But be very cautious about gaining weight just for the sake of gaining weight. And all that soy ice cream, save that for your birthday.
My other question is about the genetically modified corn and soy. So
Genetically modified what now?
the food, soy and corn, or I haven't heard anything about that.
Right now, the whole implications for genetically modified food is not in yet. Now remember, genetically modified is a whole category of research. There's all different types of modifications that happen to your food. Some will be very minimal effect on your health, and some may have dire effect and actually start working on your genetics. So when you say genetically modified, you're talking about a whole area of different types of modifications for different types of plants. I sat on a plane with a soil scientist. I was flying to Wisconsin, and I didn't tell him who I was and what my belief, because I don't want to, I wanted to hear what he had to say. His job, very interesting, I guess the Lord does things. His job was trying to determine the genetic makeup for corn or wheat, I'm not sure which, that was put out by Monsanto. Because Monsanto has patents that not even the U.S. government seems to have access to. So here's the state of Wisconsin hiring the scientist to try to decode the genetics in that corn plant. I said, that's really interesting work. He didn't say he was pro or against Monsanto. He was just saying, here's what I have to do to try to get it. And he says, some of those genetic modifications are actually a significant improvement. So I kind of knew where he was stood. And so I just stayed quiet. He says, what's going on? He says, before we had to put a lot of high pesticides and insecticides on the corn plant because we had a lot of mold and root rot and we'd lose our crop. And we have a lot of runoff that would go into the streams and pollute our streams. He says, now we've genetically modified the corn. It resists the root rot. We don't have to put near as many insecticides and pesticides on there. I'm going, 2 points for you. That was a pretty good answer. So I'm saying that genetic modification covers a whole variety of things. As a general rule, though, genetic modified plants are not for your health and will not help your health. Here's the closest we've gotten to seeing if it does alter your tissue. We know that gut flora, we've touched on that a little bit today, how healthy your intestinal tract is, how healthy and type of bacteria you have in your bowel, can be changed by the genetically modified food. We've actually seen changes in the genetics of the bacteria in the bowel of people who eat genetically modified food. Now, a bacteria cell is an animal cell, like me, okay? I'm animal in this definition. So if the GMOs can affect and change a bacteria cell, it's got a real good chance of actually changing human cell. I don't have scientific proof yet that eating a GMO food of this quantity, this long, actually changes a liver cell or a heart cell or a brain cell. I don't know, but I'm very suspicious. But I'm not going to say that it does without having at least some kind of evidence. So right now, I don't think we have the answer yet. But I will tell you this. In the lectures this morning, I was demonstrating that even in a polluted environment, with actually giving the mouse toxins, an aflatoxin, on a low-protein diet, very few of them got the disease. So don't miss the obvious. Let's do the obvious. And if you have a chance to avoid GMOs, by all means. Some countries won't even allow America to import their stuff because of GMO. I don't see a big reason for GMO. And the other thing, the reason we have GMO is for what? So we can produce more grain to raise more beef. Well, see, my thing is, get rid of all the beef. We got plenty to eat. Non-GMO. There's a simple solution, but it's a big answer.
That protein number again, you're referencing to the being in a polluted planet. Was that about 30 to 35 grams a day of protein? Is that the number?
The U.S. government, and by the way, sometimes, I think it's selective understanding. We follow certain things that the RDA says, we don't. The RDA, for the adult scientific male, which by qualifications, 5'10", 160 pounds, for that male, they're recommending 56 grams of protein a day. That's the RDA. For women, it's 44 grams a day. Those are both very safe and higher than what they need to be. Dr. Campbell, who we're talking about this morning, recommended between 25 to 30, maybe up to 35 area.
And if we at that level, we have a lot less impact of the environment, the GMO and everything.
Another point, you're eating less of it, you get less of a problem. But remember this, humans eat between 10 to 15% of the soybeans, and about the same with the corn. The data you're hearing is that about 80% is GMO. So it is humanly possible that you're getting no GMO. See, it's not all GMO. But I don't believe that. I believe that there is some GMO in the system. But now, because of the GMO, because you're buying non-GMO, you will get non-GMO if they want to tell the truth. Although we find out 5 years down the road that it came out of the same bin as the other. It's dollars and cents. So my point is this: it is possible to eat mostly non-GMO. It's like organic food. I'm not willing to pay 3 times as much for my food. I'm sorry, it's a racket. You know, I like to grow my own food. I saw a hand. Yes, sir.
There's some things about iodine deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that?
I'll do my best. Iodine deficiency shows up in a variety of ways. It shows up in immune problems. Most of the time we think about iodine deficiency in the area of thyroid and thyroid function because the thyroid hormones, the T3 and T4, the thyroid hormones, both require iodine for their production and actually contain iodine in that molecule. And so when we talk about iodine, we want to make sure that we have enough thyroid hormone, but also it's important for your immune response. And when I look at all the immune deficient diseases, cancer being our top one in that area, I'm very concerned about iodine. The other thing is that iodine can be leached from the soil if you have a significant rainfall. Western North Carolina, which I know about, has significant rainfall. We are low in boron, we are low in iodine, and that's why we are known as the Gorder Belt. So we have a lot of thyroid problems due to local deficiency in food. It's changing because everybody's food travels an estimated 1,300 miles now. So when we have had this total network of food supply right now, it's less regional specific. So we're having less of it. The other thing is that iodine is found in other tissue. For ladies, they have about 5 times or whatever the iodine in breast tissue than they even have in their thyroid gland. So therefore, you can see the connection between breast cancer, low thyroid, and low iodine levels too. So that's a direct cancer result from that standpoint. The other thing is that if you have a radioactive bomb commonly known as a atomic bomb, or a atomic plant meltdown like Chernobyl, then what you have is radioactive iodine, I-131, which by the way is the same stuff they injected you to kill your thyroid gland. This iodine 131 is radioactive material, and if it's dispersed in the atmosphere, what you can do to protect yourself is take a massive dose of potassium iodide, and it will saturate all the iodine receptors in your body, and you won't pick up any of the radioactive stuff. So your U.S. government has got a major store of potassium iodide, in case you wanted to know.
So the other two.
I'm not a conspiracist, except sometimes.
My mom had thyroid.
Gordon? Yes.
And she had gone to the doctor and they gave her medication, but she didn't take it because my grandma told her they dropped a few drops of iodine
In the water.
and she drank them and it went.
Then she was a classic iodine deficient enlargement of the gland. The reason the thyroid gland enlarges is because it's trying to filter more blood in an attempt to get a higher iodine concentration. I'm glad she responded so well. She didn't need the medication. She just needs. She was minerally deficient.
And what if you like I have over, I have hypo. You know what's low iodine?
Hypo.
Yeah.
You're hypo.
Yeah.
You're low.
That's low.
Hypo is low. Hyper is high.
Well, I'm hyper.
Okay, what's your TSH level? The reason I'm suspicious is because I would classify you as hypo, low thyroid, not high. Yeah, you would surprise me. Well, you can have a high TSH. Good. You can have a high TSH, and that means you're low thyroid. So a lot of doctors don't always interpret your thyroid things correctly.
Yeah, and I put that thing down in my throat and check it out.
You can't check it out from inside your throat unless it's grossly enlarged, pushing on your larynx or your esophagus. You don't check thyroids out usually from the inside unless you're having some swallowing issues or whatever.
Why did they do that to me?
Ma'am, I don't know, but I'd be checking you on the outside. That's all I can tell you.
Can you take a kelp tablet every day to get the iodine that you need? Is that a good way to?
Kelp is a very mild dose of iodine, very minor amount. Definitely can't hurt. You've got a lot of other good minerals with it. The only thing about iodine is it also grows in the ocean with a whole lot of other polluted stuff. Usually a good dose of whale do too. So I mean, I tend not to think too highly of what comes out of the ocean.
You said there were some other tissues, the female, that's the breast tissue.
Breast
Males?
iodine tissue. Male, I don't know of any other tissue that's that high in
So
iodine.
you don't have to worry about the breast.
Not that I'm aware of. Cancer in general, though.
Cancer.
How do you get enough iodine? That's my question. How do you make sure you get enough iodine?
If you're in an iodine deficient area, you definitely need to take a supplement. They've taken it out of salt, and most people now are using different types of salt, from Himalayan to rock salt to whatever. Right across the board, I happen to believe that we have enough deficiencies in the United States in our soil that I just out and out recommend a liquid mineral to people. I don't know another way of getting around it.
And it's all the iodine and all the others.
It's got the trace minerals. It's got like 72 different minerals in there. Yeah. It comes out of Salt Lake City, so you know where it comes from. All the land all around Salt Lake has been running in there since the flood, and so probably if we were in the Holy Land, we'd go to the Dead Sea and get a glass full once again. Once in a while, we'd probably be in good shape.
Have you heard about barley rice or barley green?
Barley green?
Yeah.
What do you want to know about it?
I mean, I know Dr. Day had cancer and she used to.
Lorraine Day?
Yeah. And I take it sometimes to meditate.
Barley green is a good chlorophyll source. Barley is a good source. It is not as good as alfalfa. Alfalfa always does better in a land that is not well mineralized on the surface. Alfalfa has the ability to penetrate roots down to many feet below the surface and pick up nutrients that barley plant. Barley is a surface feeder, where plants tend to go out. Alfalfa tends to go deep, and it tends to be much higher nourishment. So if you get a product, get alfalfa chlorophyll, dried alfalfa tablets. You might think you're a cow, but they're concentrated, but nowhere near what you need. I'd go with a liquid chlorophyll. I think you'd be a lot better off than barley green. I'm not a big fan of barley green because they charge way too much for a product that they didn't need to.
$45.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Now, I've always been told that bananas and raisins are a good source of protein and iron. But that's
Bananas and raisins a good source of protein.
potassium.
What's that? Potassium.
Yeah, potassium.
Yes, both of those foods have a good source of potassium, and so do strawberries, blueberries, grapefruit, oranges, everything. Fruit is a good source of potassium, period, right across the board. Raisins also have a little bit of iron in it. Remember, man brought out a good point. When you cut down on your protein level, here's what you gain. You need less B12. You may, but you need less B12 because the protein content in your diet regulates how much B12 you need to metabolize it. So if you're already a vegetarian and worried about B12, but being on a lower protein diet, you need less B12 to take care of you. And by the way, vegetarians don't have lower B12 levels in their bloodstream than non-vegetarians. There are more meat eaters with low B12 levels than there are vegetarians with low B12 levels. So don't buy that myth when you're out there either, saying, how are you going to, you're going to starve, or the uneducated medical doctor will want to make sure your B12 level is fine. He should be more concerned about his, unless he's a vegetarian along with you. The next thing you gain is you avoid most kidney diseases. The next thing you gain is you lose a whole lot of risk for becoming diabetic. The next thing you gain is you don't mature so quickly, and when you're 50, you're not looking for more wrinkles. You know, when you're 16, you can't wait to get your driver's license. But after a certain age, folks, we don't need to try to mature more quickly. I'm not talking mentally, I'm talking physically, okay? If you could slow down when you hit about 21 or 25, and you could slow it down and last for about 50 years, that would be about right, wouldn't it? But then we get spoiled and think that's normal. So anyway, there are all kinds of advantages on decreasing your protein. Having enough to have good hair, nails, skin, blood vessels, everything else, being healthy. When we lower the protein level in rats, their hair is not falling out. Okay, we're not making them deficient. But we can take a laboratory rat, the normal lifespan is about 3 years, about 900 days. We can wait till that rat reaches maturity, and for a rat that's about 3 months of age, so 100 days. After that point, once they've gone through their adolescence and now they're considered an adult rat, we can change the quantity of protein in their diet and have that rat live 1,800 days. We can double the lifespan of a rat by regulating the protein in their diet. Now, don't leave here and think that we can all live to 200. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that protein causes metabolic changes in your body that causes you to age a lot more rapid. So, there's really no advantage on this whole thing that we've done in America for the last couple hundred years that we have to have high protein. Yes, sir?
How important is boron to the body?
Boron, how we get it?
How important is it?
It's critical. I mean, it's an essential nutrient that you have to have.
We are seeing that, especially you from the
Western North Carolina?
Yeah, through erosion, the soil, boron from the soil is depleted. So
boron leads from the ground due to our high rainfall. In other words, it washes to the creeks and goes out to the Mississippi and out to the ocean.
Trace minerals that have the boron in it.
Oh yes, the trace mineral has boron in it.
so
If you want boron, you're going to get it from anything that's natural. You're going to get it from your whole wheat. You're going to get it from your beans and that type of thing, if the land that's grown on has boron in it.
right, because Israel themselves, that their soil is boron rich, so people there doesn't have arthritis much.
We haven't been testing for boron that long. That's the problem. So I really don't know if the lands out west were low in boron 50 years ago. We were testing for magnesium. The U.S. government was testing for magnesium years and years ago. The first report that I know was in 1936 when they were checking, I believe, the wheat out west for magnesium. Over the years, they've continued to test that. That's one mineral that is totally deficient. It shows up at my office in atrial fibrillation. It shows up at my office in a variety of things from cramping to muscle function, depression. You start going through the whole list. You got to make sure you get minerals. Why am I such a bug on minerals? Vitamins can only work on minerals. You can take the best vitamin in the world, and it's useless to you unless you got something for it to work on. I mean, Adam, God says from dust to dust. Hey, dirt is just good minerals. That's what it is. If you and I had the right backyard, we'd be wealthy. It's dirt, just good dirt. If you taste them, you'll believe me. No, I mean, it's just that's the way it is. We have to have this, and a lot of times it's that simple. Most people respond with their heart arrhythmia, especially the atrial type. They respond very nicely to magnesium. By the way, get a good magnesium. Don't go to Walmart. You get magnesium oxide because it'll give you diarrhea, and I wouldn't be right. I've heard of Swanson's, but you still need to read the ingredients. I don't know any company that I can send you to and recommend all their products. I'm saying it needs to be chelated magnesium.
If I didn't take it, I would have terrible cramps.
I'm glad it's helping your cramps. That's what it's for. And let's face the fact. What you absorb at age 25, you may not be absorbing anywhere near that well at 65. So just because things change don't mean that something's automatically wrong. I mean, if my face gets wrinkles, how about you think about the inside of my intestine? I mean, well, it's supposed to have wrinkles, but not the kind of type. It's getting older, that's my expression.
Magnesium citrate.
What's that?
Magnesium citrate.
Magnesium citrate is a step in the right direction. Absorption rate somewhere between probably 30 to 35%. The chelated magnesium runs between 60 and 80%, so I highly recommend that one.
Chelated.
It'll cause a lot less diarrhea. What?
I'm sorry. Chelated zinc, the same thing?
Any chelated thing, depending on what it's chelated with. When you chelate a magnesium or a calcium, you chelate it with an amino acid, a protein molecule. So when the protein goes in, it's like a hitchhiker, and you get a lot better absorption that way. Otherwise, it stays in the bowel and causes a laxative effect. Magnesium oxide, which I'm picking on Walmart, magnesium oxide is an excellent laxative, and I recommend it frequently because a lot of people need help in that area.
If you want it for cramps, you need the chelated.
What's that?
If you want to use it for the cramp purposes in your legs and your vessels, then you need the chelated.
Yeah, I use it, yeah. And remember, a cramp in the arteries in your body is called high blood pressure. Now think of it. What is in the artery walls? Thank you. If you want to relax muscles, what do? Take magnesium. Isn't natural medicine fun? Makes sense, doesn't it?
And potassium, does potassium do the same thing when you have a cramp in your...
It depends.
Okay.
Here's
Tell me
my
the difference
here's
between
my
the two.
pecking order, okay? If you came to me and said I have muscle cramps or restless leg syndrome or et cetera, we always start with magnesium. Second choice, you come back and say, that didn't do me any good. At least you gave me another chance at you, okay? Then we go to calcium. And if that does no good, third is potassium on the list. But I have my people on high potassium diets to start with. And if they're seeing me for something else, we try to take care of the whole situation. So that may be why I have less problem. But that's my pecking order. Magnesium, calcium, potassium are your main thing. Folks, it's 5:30. Can you believe it? Time for vespers. Let's conclude. We want to have a final prayer. Well, let's kneel together and ask the Lord to bless. Father in heaven, thank you for being with us this day. Thank you for allowing us these hours, these moments where we know that you have sustained and taken good care of us. I want to praise you for that. Also, I pray that as we look at taking care of this incredible asset that you've given each of us, that we will do it for your name's honor and glory, and that we will not consult our own feelings, our own taste buds, but that we will do the right because it is right. I ask for an extra blessing of motivation for each person here, because everything around us is telling us something different, but we know that your word is sure and that you will sustain and take care of us, and we thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.